I am Rosaline Sonneworth, chairperson of the Oral History Project, St. Louis Center for Holocaust Studies, St. Louis, Missouri. Today I will be interviewing Edward Knize, United States Army, 30th Division. He was at some scenes of liberation during World War II. He is currently residing in St. Louis, Missouri. What's your full name, please?
Edward J. Knize.
And where are you from?
St. Louis.
And you entered the United States Army at what age?
About 26.
And what was your wartime experience like?
Well, I was a forward. I worked as a communications sergeant for a forward observer party, directing fire from a field artillery. I was a field artilleryman, and we sent the missions of supporting fire for the infantry.
And you were sent abroad at what year?
1944, I think. Early in 1944.
Is when you first crossed?
Beg pardon?
When you first crossed the ocean? And
I was in, before I was there, but let's see, before D-Day. I was off the coast of Scotland when D-Day hit, and shortly after that, I hit to the Channel and went over into France.
Continue on with your D-Day experience, or what happened after D-Day?
Well, I was in a replacement depot, and I was taken out of it about, I guess, 10 days after D-Day. I was taken out and sent to the 30th Infantry Division, in which I fought and stayed in that division all through the war.
What did you do in that division? What was your job?
I was a communications sergeant for a forward observer. Our job was supporting fire for the infantry and laying down heavy barrages. And it's a very dangerous job, and I managed to stick with that all the way through the war till the war ended. I was in that job. I fought in France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. After the fighting was over is when I had an invitation from officers to go with them to see a concentration camp. It turned out to be Buchenwald down in, it was much further south, and we got in a truck and drove for a couple hours and got to Buchenwald concentration camp, in which I walked through it. I talked to one of the men who helped took us through there and explained everything to us, and we saw some rather frightening sights.
Could you describe what you saw?
Well, the first thing I saw was a pile of human bones and skeletons, and some of the inmates there. They just had such a tragic expressions on their faces. It really shocked me, and I wasn't easily shocked because I had seen a lot of brutality on the battlefield, but this was different. The fighting and brutality between fighting men and that between well-armed fighting men and helpless civilians is quite different.
Did you know who these civilians were?
No, I didn't know who they were. All I knew is they were human beings, and I could see the pain and agony in their faces, and how when you came close to them, they shied away. One man, he kept following me and looking at me, and his eyes had just burned a hole through me, and I wanted so badly to give him something to help him. And one thing I had was some candy. So I took it out of my pocket and I put it in his hand. When I touched him, he started recoiling. I said, "I'm not going to hurt you." And I put the candy in his hand, and then I signified, because I couldn't speak his language, by his mouth, I get it in my stomach that it was good to eat. And I ate a small piece of it to show that it was safe. And he kind of stayed there, and he kept watching me until I was out of sight.
What else did you see?
There was a tragic thing about that. It was in the air. The place just never before had it been anywhere where the surroundings seemed to give off it wasn't just smells. It was a feeling I had. It sounds crazy maybe, but then they took me through and showed me some of the ovens. They had 3 ovens, which they told me went 24 hours a day. And some of the people that pushed in them wasn't dead yet. And then they had the regular system set up where they knocked the fillings out, and they had 2 barrels, or one filled with fillings and dental work that they had knocked out of the
victims,
out of the corpses, and the glasses that they took off, like wearing the frames, and had them piled up in there. And that was the most horrible thing. Like I say, at first I was in a state of shock. And I wasn't easily shocked at that point because I had fought all the way across Europe. But that shocked not only me, but other fighting men. It's difficult to describe. I know it's difficult for anybody who's been in the Holocaust to demonstrate or to tell anybody about their innermost feelings when they were in those camps, and I can understand why. I thought that we guys in the lines of fighting men had put up with a lot. But when I seen what those poor people put up with, I knew that what we did was nothing what we felt. And that even though we had seen a lot and seen the camps, I knew that the only way you could understand what they were up against was if they'd been in with them. Because in battles, nobody knows what a battle soldier puts up with unless he's another one that's been there with him and has been through the same experiences. People can try to understand it, you can try to convey it, but you have to be there and been through it yourself to understand the full impact of this terribly destructive thing. I couldn't figure out what sense it made and why one human being or how one human being could treat another like that. I was horrified to hear about Elsa Koch, who was a German woman who worked in the camp, and she'd go through there, and the gentleman there was conducting me told me he'd see a Polish prisoner or one of them with a fancy tattoo. She'd have him killed and then have him skinned and make lampshades. That was her hobby, making lampshades out of the skin that was tan. And bad enough for men to be brutes, but I didn't know women could be brutal like that. Then another thing that shocked me was one whole building there, they put children from 6 to 12 years of age, and they had vans where they periodically put them in vans, and the exhaust pipe run up into the back of the van, and wherever they were going, like, of course, all the children that would be in the van would be dead, and some of the children knew that, and they tried to, the stronger ones would try to climb up in the attic. It was a barracks-type building with just wood, tar paper sides, and a false ceiling, and the children pulled the ceiling aside, and they'd climb up, the ones that were strong enough, and get up there and hide so that they wouldn't have to get in the vans. And then that's just the thought of that sickened me, because I've got children myself, and I can't imagine treating children like that. And there was a part where they conducted medical experiences, and they put the victims, they never, of course, knocked them out when they operated on them, they just let them scream. And the first thing I seen was a human being's body in a big container, a big jar, and he was skinned because from his ankles to his wrists to around his neck there, and the body was stripped of skin. And another one there was a head that was sawed right in half and just setting in whatever kind of liquid it is to preserve it. And I couldn't figure out wherever you turned, like in another room there where they did torture, they had hooks in the ceiling, and I said, what are these for? And I noticed that down about a foot above the floor, the concrete was gouged out. And he told me, well, that's where they tortured them. They tie these poor guys, men and women, up and hang them upside down by their feet, and then they torture them, and they'd be digging at the concrete with their fingernails, and actually dug part of the concrete out in their agony. By that time, I was more than shocked. There's no describing how I felt. To what purpose, I can never understand. But this was done. They had a regular line, a disassembly line, like in a slaughterhouse to take care of the corpses. And then I noticed under the ovens they had the grates open in containers like tin cans, and they take the ashes. They burnt these people and they put them in the cans. And then I said, so what are they doing that for? Well, they sell that to some of their people. And along with this business about the lampshades made out of human skin, they had some bars of soap there. And I said, what's the soaps there for? I said, well, that's the soap that was made out of human flesh, because they were short on fats and that. And they had some other ones, those bags. And I said, what's in that? And they said, it was made out of, it was with plant food, when you want to feed a plant, you
fertilizer. Fertilizer.
Fertilizer made out of human bodies. That was just about all I cared to see. So that's about the extent of it, which isn't going to be much help to you, I suppose, but it's all I got to say. But those few things that I seen that burned a hole in me for many years, that I just can't seem to get some of it out of my mind, you know.
How long were you in the camp?
About an hour.
About an hour.
I found myself at the end getting angry because I had fought SS men who conducted that camps, and my unit had fought SS men many, many times. And we were called, the Germans actually called us FDR stormtroopers because we fought so hard against them. And now whether they meant that as a compliment or not, I don't know, but to me it was no compliment. I thought, as I got out of there, I believe I felt so angry at the stormtroopers who would pick innocent men like that. But then I got to thinking that if I shot some of them, then I'd be as bad as they were. Well, that leaves you in a quandary. You get this evil, but there's an air about this thing. There's something in the air of one of those camps, like there's evil is alive, like it's alive. And if you look for logic in some of the things they did, you can't find any. And a priest told me one time, Ed, you won't find any logic in evil. It's not logical. So you can't. I know that that's true, but I do know that there's a foulness in there. And these poor people that I seen that be standing there looking at me as I go through the camp, that first sensation I had of when they looked at me, that they didn't, not that they looked at me like they hated me, but I had the feeling that these people had been up against such horrible things, and I wondered if anybody could ever help them again. And to my delight, I've talked to some of them who have recovered, not only recovered, but had a successful life, and I've got the utmost admiration for them. That's about the extent of my experiences in Pukenwald.
When did you find out that these were Jewish victims? Could you tell us about?
Well, I asked them, and the men conducting the tour, that Freedom told me that. So that part of them were Jewish, they weren't all Jewish, and there were quite a few. To begin with, they told me that the stormtroopers, when the Americans got close to the camp, was through there to try to kill all the inmates of Buchenwald, but the boys got up there too quickly for them to finish their job. The GIs got in there so fast that the stormtroopers didn't have time to execute all of them. So there was bodies all over the place, but what percentage, they didn't tell me, I don't know, but I know that there was quite a few bodies that the men told me. A lot of that was cleaned up. I didn't see it as it happened, but they were horrified too. The men that Freedom were more horrified than I was because they seen a lot more than I did. I just seen what you could see walking through there. The officer, as I understand it, that was instructed, that was the head of the unit that freed them, got angry at the townspeople nearby and he made them all get in line and go through the camp, they told me. And he said the people were coming out there denying that it ever took place and all that stuff. And it was right. To begin with, Buchenwald sits in a valley, and it's beautiful country. And I wonder how anybody could live in such a beautiful country as Germany was right there and do things like that. And the people could look, some of them could look right out their kitchen windows and look right down on the camp, and then they denied that they knew anything about it going on, which was I wonder if they think we're really stupid enough to believe that. The camp looked, like I said, was in a beautiful spot, but there certainly was no beauty in that camp. I had a premonition of it as I walked through the gates, like I was stepping, like I dreaded to go in. And I hadn't even begun to see the horrible things, you know.
Yes. You had no idea that this was going on beforehand.
I didn't, no. No, the only thing I heard of it was I was further north. We were next to the English, up in the northern end of the line. We were the foremost toward the north, and most of the camps and stuff like that was further south. And we were only 30 miles from Berlin when the war ended. We were, I believe, the closest American troops to Berlin. And some of the officers came up and told us about these camps that they were further south, that they were discovering these horrible camps and what they were doing. And so they decided to send a few men down there. So officers did, and they took me with them. And that's how I happened to see it that quick. The whole division didn't go down there, just a few of us. And they didn't explain it much to me other than that it was horrible the way they were treating people, that they were killing mostly Jewish, but not all Jewish. There was a lot of, I think there was a lot of people probably killed that nobody will ever know about because they were slaughtering them left and right. They had like I said, that 3 ovens in Buchenwald they said was going 24 hours a day. There's another smell about the place, a sickening sweet smell that I associated with death because we were out on a battlefield one time and I told one of the men, there's Germans in here, and they said, how do you know? I said, I can smell them. And he said, you're crazy. He said, well, we'll check and see. And about 100 yards from us was 15 dead Germans. And it had that sickening sweet smell. Once you smell it, you never forget it. And that hung around that camp, I guess, from those ovens. I don't know. All I know is that the smell of it is one I'll never forget. Because later on in life, when I came back and I was a civilian, a man had a stroke and dropped dead near me. And I went over to assist him, and I smelled it again, and I said, he's dead. And he says, you're crazy. When they called the medics from Missouri Pacific Hospital, said he's right, he is dead. So
you fought in a very famous battle, the Battle of the Bulge. Could you tell us about that?
Well, the Germans broke through. The line was thin, and they had acquired a lot of power in one spot down opposite St. Vith. So they broke through, and I think the 106th Division was one of the divisions there, but there's somewhere around 60 or 70 divisions, so that the American divisions was spread out pretty thin, and they were hit with overwhelming power, and they just rolled through. Well, on one shoulder and on the south shoulder of the breakthrough, at Bastogne, the 101st Division held. The Germans surrounded them, but they couldn't finish them off. The paratroopers did a good job of fighting them. We, on the northern shoulder of the breakthrough, they put They put us there because between us and Liège was a big gasoline dump, and that was important to the Germans. And they were trying to get to that dump, and we were fighting them off. And we had two good divisions. We were fortunate enough to have the 1st Infantry on our left and the 82nd Airborne on our right. And we had within the first few hours, at the time we got down there, we had a big battle in which we shoved the Germans back and slowed them down we were 60 miles past us, but they couldn't get through us. They couldn't get around us, and we had all the roads cut off except one. We held out, and the Germans kept going deeper and deeper into Belgium, but they couldn't open up the line anymore. So the officer said, well, when we get enough power, we're going to close it up, and they'll all be in a bag, and that's exactly what happened. That's how they... But the biggest thing about the Battle of Bulge was the fact that the Germans got into the back lines, and men who normally, in the scheme of things, don't do any active fighting, the quartermaster and that run supplies had to grab guns and do fighting, and he did a magnificent job of it. And it was a soldier's battle. The little soldiers slowed the Germans down until we could drive them out, which happened.
Could you tell us about what date this battle took place?
It started out about December the 17th, I think the Germans broke through the lines.
What year?
1944. And that was in December, and I remember that because Christmas Day I was sitting by a 50 caliber machine gun thinking what a heck of a way to spend Christmas. And I think about 6 or 8 weeks, I don't remember exactly, of fighting. And finally, the weather was real foggy, and the Germans had an advantage because the Air Force couldn't do anything against them. The fog was so thick they couldn't fly. And it went on for a couple of weeks, and finally the weather cleared, and when it did, the Air Force got into the act, and that was the beginning of the end for the Battle of the Bulge. Like I said, our units and 101st Airborne kept the opening from being any wider, and all they could do was go deeper. They couldn't spread out this way, so finally we had enough power on our shoulders to close it up, and they were all in a bag, and it was pretty bad for them. They defeated. It was our last chance. They stripped the Russian lines in the east and everything in order to get that kind of power there. But it didn't work because we kept them from getting gasoline, and their tanks began running out of gas. As I understand it, when Pfeiffer was the name of the commanding officer of the Germans, and he wanted to get to Liège to get to the gas, and they had 5,000 men attacked. And when that battle was over, that was the almost first day or two, there was only 2,000 Germans out of 5,000 left, and they had to back off. And it was things like that from brave men who stood there with not much power behind them, but just fought hard, that won that battle. It was won by the little soldiers.
What happened in your Army career then?
Beg pardon?
What happened in your Army career after the Battle of the Bulge?
Oh, well, then we went back up into the north after the battle, and we proceeded on the offensive for the Battle of Germany, and the industrial section of Germany sat there, and we went around one side of it, and Patton and the men on the south went around the other side and cut off the whole center of the industrial center of Germany. And we stopped all the way up. We were making terrific gains, sometimes 60, 70, 80 miles a day. The German army started cracking up, and we kept attacking. And we got to the Ruhr River, and I asked the officer where the next objective was. He says, Berlin itself. We're going to be fighting in Berlin and in the suburbs in the morning. And by in the middle of the night, they made us pull back, and I said, "What's going on?" They said, "Well, the Russians are, they don't want us to take Berlin. They want the Russians to take Berlin. So we're going to lay back and wait for the Russians to catch up with us," which we did. We met the Russians at the river there. 3 weeks later, we stood there and held. And the Germans a lot of the Germans tried to surrender to us to keep them from surrendering to the Russians, but we were told not to accept their surrender. And we pushed them back and made them stay on the other side of the river, and that's the way it stayed until the Russians come up to us. And we met and greeted one another and so forth in the wars.
After the war, what did you do? You came back to St. Louis?
I came back to St. Louis.
And I see you have an organization called the Battle of the Bulge.
That's
Can you tell us about it?
That's a new organization that began. My wife has got more dope on that than I have. The object of it was to all the different units that were in the battle. Some of the gentlemen got the idea of starting this organization for veterans, and the qualification would be for men from any units that fought in the battle, which are considerable. And we formed that, and I had already belonged to the American Legion, and I joined this one, and that's what the organization I'm mainly active in now.
Could you tell us about your badge, the badge on your hat?
Well, this is the logo of the Battle of Bulge organization.
Can you hold it up, please? Okay. That's it. Okay, that's good. Can you?
This is some.
Hold it up. Hold it up. Okay, tell us about the badge now.
Well, I really don't have that much information on it. That's the badge of the insignia of the organization.
Okay.
That's about the best I can tell you. Why they selected that, I don't know. I never had it explained.
And what's next to the badge?
This is medals for marksmanship, rifle, carbine, and throwing hand grenades.
Okay.
This is a badge that's celebrating the 50 years since the Battle of the Bulge. 50 years anniversary, which will soon be in I think November, late November. And on this side is medals.
Yeah, hold it.
There's a good conduct medal. There's a bronze star that I won, and campaign medals, because I was, like I said, was in 4 campaign ribbon, and it should have 4 stars on it, for 4 battle stars. I was in 4 battles: France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. My unit got a Croix de Guerre from France and 1 from Belgium for helping free those countries. That's about it.
Very good. The Edward Knize, the St. Louis Center for Holocaust Studies, thanks you so much for coming here and giving your time and effort, and we appreciate it very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.